You blocked out 2 hours. You closed every tab. You put your phone away. You followed every productivity rule, yet you still spent most of that time staring at a blank page, rewriting the same sentence, or drifting into a fog you couldn't shake. That feeling has a name, and it is not laziness. It is not distraction. It is something far more specific. And once you understand what is happening inside your brain, you will never approach deep work the same way again. Deep work is not a time block. It is a neurological state, and you cannot schedule your way into a neurological state any more than you can schedule yourself into falling asleep. Think about the last time you tried to force sleep. The more you told yourself to relax, the more awake you became. Deep focus works the same way. The harder you try to enter it, the more you activate the part of your brain that evaluates whether you are succeeding, and that loop is the opposite of the state you want. Neuroscientist Andrew Huberman explains that the prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for planning and self-monitoring, becomes highly active when you are anxious or evaluating yourself. A highly active prefrontal cortex is a sign you are not in flow. The monitoring brain and the performing brain compete. You cannot fully inhabit both. So when you sit down and nothing comes, you start monitoring. You check the clock. You wonder if you are being productive. You judge quality before you have produced anything to judge. Every micro-evaluation pulls you further from the state you need. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi spent decades studying flow, deep absorption in a task. His most consistent finding: flow rarely arrives on demand. It emerges when task difficulty matches your current skill level. Not too hard, not too easy. A narrow corridor of optimal challenge. Here is where most people go wrong. They sit down and immediately attempt their most important work. But your most important work is usually your most uncertain work. Unclear path, high stakes, real possibility of failure. Uncertainty plus stakes triggers a threat response. Not creativity, survival. Your nervous system does not distinguish between a predator and a deadline. Cortisol rises, attention narrows. Broad associative thinking becomes unavailable. You are not failing to focus. Your brain is focusing just on escaping the threat. Stephen Kotler calls this the struggle phase. Friction the brain must pass through before it releases into focus. Most people interpret it as failure and either push harder or quit. Both responses interrupt the process right before it resolves. The struggle phase is not a malfunction. It is the entry fee, the counterintuitive fix. Lower the stakes at the start. Not forever, just for the first 15 minutes. Do not begin with the whole chapter or the full proposal. Begin with the smallest, most concrete version of the task. One sentence, one idea, one tiny component. Make failure nearly impossible, then build. This is not avoidance. It is engineering the neurological conditions for real work. Small wins quiet the prefrontal cortex. You are warming the engine before demanding peak output. No sprinter runs full speed without a warm-up. Cognitive performance is no different. Huberman also points to research on visual focus. Narrowing your gaze to a single fixed point for 60 to 90 seconds at the start of a session can shift the brain toward focus. The visual and attentional systems are linked. Diffuse eyes, diffuse mind. Still eyes, still mind. It is a biological on-ramp. Csikszentmihalyi found something else. People who entered flow most often were not those with the most time or perfect environments. They were people genuinely curious about the process, not fixated on the result. Result orientation blocks the state. Am I productive enough? Is this good enough? That loop closes the mind. Process orientation opens it. What happens if I try this? Where does this lead? Ask a question instead of demanding an outcome. So when you sit down and the fog appears, you now know what is happening. Threat mode. Monitoring instead of performing. Warm-up skipped, sprint demanded. The fix is not discipline. It is reversing the sequence. Fix your gaze. Start smaller than feels right. Let the first 15 minutes be the warm-up, not the race. Ask a question instead of requiring an answer. Then keep going without checking whether it is working. The state will come, not because you forced it, but because you finally stopped blocking it.